Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. We've had a very intense day today and I wanted to talk to you about three important developments. The first one is the updates from the ground, the resistance fighting Israel in Gaza, what's happening, and it's very intense. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the recent statements from Benjamin Netanyahu, who had a press conference just a few hours ago. A couple of other statements from Musa Abu Marzouk, who is a senior leading figure in the Hamas political wing. And the third thing I wanted to talk about is some very dangerous statements that were said by the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, and were reported by Ben Caspit, who is an Israeli journalist in the Walla news website. So firstly, we'll start off with Gaza. We've had operations primarily from Al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, and Saraya al-Quds, the military wing of the PIJ. They both had joint operations together and individual operations. They released their videos publicly and shared it with the press. Al Jazeera showed some of them alongside other Arab networks. In terms of the operations on the ground, both of these groups attacked an Israeli base called Sufa. They attacked it with mortars, both of them. They also had rocket launches at areas surrounding Gaza, and they had confirmed landings in some of those areas. They also targeted tanks around the Jabalia area together. In terms of what they've done individually, Al-Qassam brigades released multiple videos of them targeting several Israeli tanks with Yasin 105 RPG missiles. They attacked around 6 Israeli tanks, and their attacks were diversified from going up from tunnels and from buildings inside of Gaza. When it comes to Saraya al-Quds, they had several ambushes in place, and clearly there were many casualties. Now, with Al-Qassam's attacks, we've had at least 20 Israeli soldiers directly hit. With the Saraya al-Quds, at least a dozen, because we've seen a couple of Apache helicopters trying to rescue the Israeli soldiers who were wounded or killed, and they were also throwing flares to avoid any anti-aircraft missiles launched at them from the ground, because the resistance is getting more sophisticated with attacking the helicopters and targeting Israeli drones, etc. Saraya al-Quds also attacked soldier gatherings near northeast Al-Burej. Now, Al-Burej is a very difficult area that Israel has been trying to get into since the beginning of this war, and they constantly fail. They are unable to penetrate this area. So Saraya al-Quds targeted soldier gatherings with 107 missiles and mortar shellings as well. So they targeted them while they attempt to get in Al-Burej, and they failed yet again, Israel. And Israel's also trying to continue the assassination spree outside the borders. So today they tried to assassinate a senior Hezbollah figure in Lebanon, but that attempt was a failure. However, we've received confirmations from multiple news networks that several security guards were killed in that attack, but it doesn't seem like Israel is stopping with the assassinations abroad. And Netanyahu confirmed that in his statement that he released earlier on this evening, which I will be talking about in a second. Firstly, Musa Abu Marzouk, a senior figure in Hamas, he confirmed today in an interview that Israel is going back to the negotiating table after they've realized they are unable to release their hostages through military pressure. Now, we've spoken about previously how Hamas had conditions ever since the temporary ceasefire ended that they won't release any hostages, any Israeli hostages in Gaza, unless Israel stops the war. And him confirming that Israel is negotiating, it's showing signs that Israel is slowly climbing down the ladder and trying to reach somewhat of an agreement with Hamas. Now, some of these military movements that we've seen in Gaza, especially the temporary withdrawals from North Gaza and from other parts, they might have been interpretations to some of the negotiations that have been happening behind closed doors. Now, usually, to make negotiations successful, they don't usually reveal what's happening inside of them, but some things that happen on the ground can be a translation to some negotiations that are happening behind closed doors. But obviously, Hamas and the Palestinian resistance are not being fooled by these moves, because to them, they want Israel to completely stop the war and withdraw from Gaza, like Netanyahu stated in his press conference earlier this evening. And in his press conference, Benjamin Netanyahu, he said that Israel is continuing on all fronts, whether when it comes to Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, and anywhere else. He said no one who is hostile to Israel is immune from Israel targeting them, whether it's Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, or anywhere else, which is an indirect confirmation that Israel is the actual side targeting these people in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iran, and in other parts. He also said that Israel is working to release the Israeli hostages from Gaza, but that Israel totally rejects the Hamas conditions. Now, for Israel to say, we totally reject the Hamas conditions, clearly the Hamas conditions have been provided to Israel. And what are these Hamas conditions that Netanyahu is talking about? Well, he said that Hamas's conditions are stopping the war, withdrawing from Gaza, releasing elite figures from Israeli prisons, and Hamas remaining in power in Gaza. And he also said that if they agree to those conditions, that means their soldiers died for nothing, that the citizens of Israel won't be able to go back to the areas surrounding Gaza, that there will be no security for these people, and that the next 7th of October will only be a matter of time. He said that he's not willing to let such a lethal blow happen to Israel, and that's why, according to him, the total victory of Israel is necessary to release the hostages and stop this war. And when he was talking about this absolute Israeli victory, he stated that Israel must have full security control in Gaza, and Israel must have full security control in all the areas to the west of the Jordan River. So he had statements, obviously, that he's not agreeing to a Palestinian state, and now he's confirming that he won't have anyone else in charge of security apart from Israel. And he also said that he doesn't want Gaza to have any potential threat against Israel, that they shouldn't have any hostile government, and that Israel must have, again, the full security control when it comes to the Gaza Strip. So he's still persistent. He said he reiterated all of this to Joe Biden, but he's still persistent in his way to eliminate the Hamas, according to him, despite the fact that multiple leading figures in the Israeli security establishment, if not all of them, are telling him that's mission impossible, which is what was mentioned in an article for Ben Caspit, who is a leading analyst in Israel in the Walla Israeli website. He wrote an article confirming the increased split in Israel. Now, ever since the beginning of this war, I've been mentioning about how much of a division there is in Israel, especially when it comes to the war cabinet, to the IDF, to the political elite, and in the Israeli society as well. But the highlight of the division was between Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, who's the defense minister. He obviously had tense disagreements with the leadership of the IDF alongside other leading figures in Israel, but this was the key main highlight, and now it seems like it's going up a notch when it comes to their conflict. Now, Ben Caspit, in his article, he mentioned some of the things we discussed previously, such as Netanyahu banning Yoav Gallant from speaking with the leaders of the Mossad, the leaders of the Shabak. Another thing that he added is he prevented him from having any dealings with the latest deal to let medicines in Gaza. So not only that the guy is preventing him from speaking with leading figures in the security establishment, he doesn't want to have anything to do with the deals that happen between Israel and Gaza, despite the fact that he's a defense minister, a senior leading figure. He also mentioned that during one of the meetings between Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, that one of Netanyahu's aides spotted one of Gallant's aides recording the whole meeting. Apparently he had a camera, a device with a red light showing that it's recording, and a massive brawl erupted that almost led to actual fighting. And it wasn't only then. There was another meeting that was attended by Ron Dermer, in which Yoav Gallant participated. And a witness to that meeting said that Yoav Gallant threatened during that meeting that next time he will bring a brigade from Golani to implement order. Imagine that. Now, you have a split in the Israeli army. It's known. There are more radical fractions in the army that were actually deployed now in Gaza. I mean, Golani fully withdrew, and Golani is one of the oldest Israeli brigades. They've been fighting from 1948, and they represent the vast majority of the citizens of Israel from multiple backgrounds. And they had very deep differences with Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, ever since the beginning of the war, we've seen videos of Israeli soldiers swearing at Netanyahu, refusing to meet him, criticizing him heavily. Some of the soldiers that were in hospitals, they refused to have visits from Benjamin Netanyahu. And these groups within the IDF, they have frictions between them that almost led to killings previously. For example, before this war, there was a fierce fight between Netzach Yehuda, the Eternity of Judea brigade in the West Bank, which consists mainly radical settlers in the West Bank, and the Golani brigade, and it was recorded by some of the Israeli soldiers. And in this war, Benjamin Netanyahu hoped that he would unite the army and unite the people of Israel, because don't forget, there were protests against Netanyahu and his plans for the judicial reform. We had record numbers of people protesting against him. But clearly, this division didn't stop, and this division isn't going nowhere. You've reached a level where the defense minister is threatening to use a certain brigade within the IDF, and there's a reason why he said the Golani brigade and not any other brigade, because clearly they show more sympathy with him than they do for Benjamin Netanyahu. That's why they introduced the Kfir division in Gaza a few weeks ago instead of Golani, which consists of radical settlers from the West Bank, the people who follow Itamar Ben Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, the very far extreme right wing in Israel. And it didn't end with that meeting. Apparently, according to a witness, and it was also mentioned in this article, Yoav Gallant actually tried to storm into Netanyahu's offices at one point, and a massive fight almost broke out between the security guards, the advisors, with both parties. And then he made those threats. So the friction that we're seeing, the tension, the disagreements that are clearly translated when it comes to the war objectives. Netanyahu wants to demolish Hamas. Yoav Gallant wants to weaken their military capabilities. Their refusal to have press conferences together many times, not just once. These things are clearly escalating, and people are finding it hard to conceal them because there are witnesses at the end of the day saying these things. And when you have people from inside the meetings revealing news to the press, it's a catastrophe. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu regularly security checks anyone who wants to attend a cabinet meeting that he does not trust. He previously had a security check for the IDF chief, and he was fuming back then. Imagine the level of distrust. You have the prime minister not trusting the IDF chief and suspecting that he has some sort of recording devices to record what's happening in the meeting and potentially use it as leverage against Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, with all of these tensions, the potential of a coup happening in Israel is getting ever more likely, because you have a person like Benjamin Netanyahu who is only thinking about pleasing the people who are keeping his government in place, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, and completely disregarding the whole war cabinet and now the majority of the Israeli population, whether you're talking about Zionist population who are for a Zionist Israel, and the people who are questioning everything to do with Israel as a state. I mean, you have increased talks about Israel as a Jewish state ending, Israel's Zionist dream ending. You have over 2.5 million people outside of Israel now, 1.2 million of which were there before the war, and then the rest followed after the war started. And recently, the World Zionist Organization, they even had a poll in which they said that 80% of the Israelis outside of Israel are not planning to return. So the longer this war takes, the longer you don't have an agreement, the longer the people feel that they're unsafe and that the future and fate of their country is completely uncertain, the more the likelihood of something very drastic happening in Israel. And it could be only a matter of time unless someone decides to take decisive action and oust Netanyahu to try and save Israel. And these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope I've shed some light and added some beneficial information for you. And I will hopefully see you soon in the next video. Take care.